Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time the question comes to us from Psycho, who asked, "Hey Thor, with many of the old franchises in entertainment like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or Halo struggling the last decade to meet fan expectations or hopes, I always feel there are parts of the respected communities who claim the franchise died at a certain point quite quickly, while still following everything it puts out, and some even getting hyped by every trailer just to say it's dead again 2 weeks later. Do you believe a franchise as big as Star Wars can ever truly die, with Disney maybe hitting the reboot button 20 years down the line, and with the Lucas movies still being what they were and people still loving them for it? Do you think people can really let go, or is there even a need for it?" Okay, so first of all, I don't think Star Wars is ever going to truly die, which isn't to say that 1,000 years from now, or maybe even 100 years from now, it's still going to be this big, well-known mainstream thing that virtually everyone has heard of and knows about, or maybe it won't even be a thing at all at that point. I'm not saying new stories will be still told in this galaxy that many years down the road, or that there's no endpoint to Star Wars ever. Only that no matter what, it's going to be a long, slow fade from relevancy into obscurity, and then eventually into virtual oblivion many, many years from now. And barring Disney shutting it down or them stopping the production of any and all Star Wars content, which they won't do no matter how bad it gets, they'll always use the name for something. There's not going to be this singular moment that we can all recognize and point to as the moment of death for the whole franchise. Though certainly an individual may and likely will, they'll be able to point to a moment that they personally stopped caring, or we can point to a moment where large numbers of people stopped caring. Basically, it's not going to be a pull the trigger moment and then we can all proclaim the franchise dead. Because for one, it has too much history for many of us. Just because you may hate what Disney is currently doing with it, doesn't mean you now have to hate the film or the animated series, game book, or whatever else it might be that made you love it in the first place. For example, no matter how bad Star Wars could potentially get in the Disney era, I'm never going to not love Return of the Jedi and consider it my favorite film of all time. Same with Luke Skywalker. I may not like what was done with him in The Last Jedi, but he's still my favorite fictional character of all time, and there's plenty of old EU books I can go back and read before ever watching Episode 8 again. Also, believe it or not, there is still a huge and dedicated fan base out there for the franchise. Those who either truly do love and enjoy, by and large, everything Disney has been doing with Star Wars, which is fine if that's you. Or maybe those who enjoy some but not all of it, which is the category I myself fall into. I get asked all the time, why do I still care about Star Wars? And well, it's because, if we're being completely fair and honest, they do bat around 500-ish. It seems like for every good piece of content they put out, we get a bad one. And their biggest problem, as I've pointed out before, is they tend to screw up or get wrong the truly important stuff that they need to get right, like the sequel trilogy or the Kenobi series, the stuff that's directly derived from George Lucas Star Wars. Then there's yet another group of fans, those who will consume and defend any and all Star Wars till the end of time, no matter what, because they can't bring themselves to be critical of it, because they see being critical in any way, shape, or form as being toxic, which is a rather unfortunate side effect of the overuse of that word, and others like it. And so they think they're fighting the good fight against the haters by never saying anything bad about Star Wars, their toxic positivity, if you will, and their blind faith are only enabling Disney and Lucasfilm to put out subpar content, but they can't see or understand that. In other words here, no, it's not dead, despite plenty of videos for, about the past 5 years or so now, putting in their thumbnails and titles that Star Wars is dead. But of course, putting those words in there gets you clicks and views. Hell, I'll probably use some variation of it myself for this video, and watch it end up doing relatively well for me because of it, as well as bringing out some angry fans who will click on the video just to give it a thumbs down or tell me how wrong I am, without even watching the video to know what I'm actually talking about or that I'm actually arguing against it. I always love when that sort of thing happens. All that said, I wouldn't say Star Wars is exactly in a great place right now. In fact, the next couple of years could be rather rough, if not brutal, for the franchise and lead to even more videos about it being dead. And I say that because, for one, it's been years since a film not only came out, but it'll be years before yet another film comes out, with one currently slotted for May 2026, and many believe that'll be the Rey movie, which, well, who knows how that will do at the box office. Because, sure, it may do relatively well because it's been, or will have been, nearly 7 years since the previous film hit theaters, so there will be those who just are ready to see another Star Wars film on the big screen that are going to go regardless of anything and everything else. Though you do have to balance that against the fact that Rey is not exactly the most beloved character in the franchise. I don't know how many in the more casual portion of the fan base or those in the general audience. I don't know how many of them are truly looking forward to the continuation of her story, to say nothing of the more core fan base. So the question is, will that Star Wars name and the appeal of the big screen win out against a character that many maybe don't care so much about? And I think only time will tell on that one. It also seems like The Mandalorian may have plateaued a bit, with the ratings of the most recent season, the third season, being down from the previous one, as well as both fans and critics being down on the show as well, not to mention from those I have talked to in my personal life, which, yes, is anecdotal, so take it or leave it. But most of them, who are kind of casual Star Wars fans, they were not such big fans of this previous season, which is not exactly a great sign going into the Ahsoka series when you consider, outside of the core and more hardcore fan base, she is not an extremely well-known character. I think we sometimes kind of forget that. Hers is not a name that everyone out there knows. Many of those friends and family members I talked to about The Mandalorian Season 3 struggled to remember or had no clue who she really was or what the deal is with her. Meaning, I think eventual viewership on this series is a kind of big question mark right now, as will be the case with the two shows that come after it, which are Skeleton Crew and The Acolyte, both of which don't even have a name as quote-unquote big or at least somewhat known as Ahsoka's. And as talked about in a video over on my other channel, setting up Skeleton Crew to some degree in the Ahsoka series, well, it won't matter so much if virtually no one is watching the Ahsoka series. And make no mistake, this is not me saying or arguing I think these shows will be bad. I have some high hopes for the Ahsoka series. My fingers are crossed and my excitement is going up as we get closer and closer to the release. I'm also excited to see a sort of continuation of Rebels, which could be actually another sort of strike against it. How dependent this almost certainly will be, to some extent, on having seen or some knowledge of the characters from that show. However, here, even if it is fantastic, that doesn't guarantee viewership either, which I believe was proven by the next show to come out after Skeleton Crew and Acolyte, which will be Andor Season 2, because, in my opinion, Andor was one of the greatest things Star Wars I have ever seen. Problem is, not many watched it, even with amazing critical reviews and reviews from some of us here on YouTube who talk Star Wars, though of course there were plenty out there who also didn't like it and kind of talked negatively about it. After that then, and not to get too far into the future here, but after that will probably be Mandalorian Season 4, and who knows what that's even gonna look like. Who knows if Din Djarin will even be the main character anymore since, well, he wasn't exactly the main character in Season 3, was he? It did, for better or worse, become the Bo-Katan show, which is no doubt the reason why at least some fans kind of tuned out. They wanted the adventures of Din and Grogu, and they got her story instead. So in closing here, no, Star Wars isn't dead, and I don't see it ever being truly rebooted, as the comment asked. I don't think we'll ever see them kind of try to go back and redo the original trilogy or the prequels, if they even can. It may, and hopefully is, in the contract that they signed with Lucas when they bought the company, that they cannot mess with those films. But anyway, no, I don't think Star Wars is dead, and it's not dying or going away entirely anytime soon. Even if the films and the shows continually fail and Disney is forced to shut those down, there will still be the old stuff to go back to, not to mention new books and comics and games. They're not going to stop doing those. And who knows, at that point, maybe to help sell some of them, they'll sort of resurrect the EU. Nevertheless, I do think the next few years could be a really rough patch for Star Wars in terms of numbers, and not necessarily quality of content, just in terms of who is watching or how many people are watching and how much money the company is making off of it. I think there's a good chance most, if not all, of these upcoming shows that don't have much of a name around them, especially with the Star Wars name itself not meaning quite what it once did, I think many of them may struggle to find an audience, and then those who have been proclaiming the franchise to be dead will only get louder. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. Is Star Wars dead? Is it dying? Or is it just not in a great place right now and has a few question marks around it and a few questionable years ahead of it? Or of course, you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with "Hey Thor." Whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.